Axion 9 was a secret no one wanted to keep. Not anymore. The Empire had let whispers of it escape just enough to keep dissidents frightened and obedient. A place where prisoners worked until they became bones in the black. But the real truth was worse. Kaira once ran this world. Not as a warden, not as a tyrant, something colder. She had been Aegis, a perfected evolution of enforcer design, painless, efficient, impervious. For centuries her people led with order, not cruelty, though the line blurred often in practice. Axion 9 was her proving ground, and she had excelled, until the defiant human touched her with knowledge, until her nerves screamed into life, until pain taught her what control never had. Marco's face still haunted her. Even now, days later, deep in Gamma Sector, bruises blooming across her limbs, skin rubbed raw from rust and rock, and crawling walls. His eyes lingered in her thoughts. Not because he had hurt her, but because he hadn't run. He'd seen her fall and offered no cruelty. He had simply said, "You'll want to wash that soon. It'll burn worse after the second layer of skin breaks." Compassion wrapped in medical detachment. The tunnels buzzed with rot and steam. The air smelled of metal and sweat. Prisoners moved in slow rhythms, measured breaths, cautious steps. Fear lingered here like a fog. But Kara was learning to navigate this new life. She kept to corners, avoided attention. Her voice, once a weapon, now silent more often than not. Her pain came in waves, random, unpredictable. Sometimes the cold stabbed her ribs. Sometimes the heat flared up through her boots. Sometimes the air itself seemed to bruise her lungs. And yet she endured. He found her again 3 days later. Marco. His left eye swollen shut, but his hands still precise. He was tending to a young inmate with a torn shoulder, grinding something with a shard of metal and mixing it into thick blue paste. She waited, watched. Finally, he looked up. "You followed my advice." The burns faded. She nodded. "You remember everything you ever learned?" she asked, voice hoarse. He smirked, barely. "I forget birthdays, but not molecular chains." They sat in silence for a while. The wounded boy eventually limped away. Marco began cleaning his tools, scraps of bone, torn cloth, hollow tubes. "Why? Are you helping them?" Kara finally asked. He didn't look up. "Because nobody else will." The Brotherhood noticed her, not because of her past. Not at first. They noticed her endurance. Bone Crusher was their leader. A slab of flesh and scars, with fire in one eye and darkness in the other. He watched her like a puzzle piece that didn't fit, but refused to leave the table. "You walk like a queen with broken feet," he told her once. She didn't reply. He offered her a test, not a weapon, not a fight, but a need. The water run. Retrieve filtration units from the drone-guarded sector. 12 hours. Survive, and she'd earn a space in their cruel world. Marco protested. She went anyway. She memorized the drone's thermal signature. Blind spots. Calculated the decay of their sensors from the grime buildup on their lenses. Accounted for wind drafts that might mask her heat. She moved like memory, like calculation, like survival with a pulse. She returned with 3 filters, bloodied but alive. Bone Crusher touched her wound, then nodded. "Not just broken feet," he said. "Steel in the marrow." That night, during the hour of silence when the lights died and the Tenebrae crawlers began their hunt, she found Marco trembling. She stilled his breath, calmed his panic, let her heartbeat steady his. Her hand on his chest, his eyes locked to hers. And when the creature passed by, fooled by her unnatural calm, he whispered into the dark, "I never thought an Aegis could feel." She whispered back, "I never thought a human could teach." In the days that followed, something grew. Not trust, not yet, but dependence. Shared heat in cold places, shared silence in crawling tunnels. His hand wrapped her wrist when her pain grew to sharp. Her palm steadied his mind when fear came to loud. To broken things finding rhythm. On the 7th day, she kissed him. Not with hunger, not with romance, but with recognition. A whisper pressed to his mouth as the screams of others echoed down the shaft. Her lips bruised, his bleeding. It didn't matter. In that kiss was a promise. We survive together, or we die alone. But they were not alone. Bone Crusher had watched. And deep in the tunnel's shadows, he began to doubt everything he believed about monsters, weakness, and love. The station lights flickered overhead as he entered the quiet chamber, boots scuffing softly against the worn tile. The Empire didn't believe in curtains, music, or anything resembling softness, but there, beyond the reinforced door, lay a girl. Unlike any soldier, he'd met a girl with circuitry in her throat and grief etched into her smile. "You're late," she said without looking up, her fingers, nimble and faintly twitching, assembled a memory shard into a synthetic nerve braid. It pulsed faintly, like it remembered being alive. "I brought you this," he said, and tossed the coated disc onto her workbench. She glanced at it. "Another stolen archive? From Sector 12, before the sweep came. It has old songs on it. Maybe even feelings." Her hands paused. Then, wordlessly, she slotted it into the playback unit. The room filled with crackling static, and then the wavering voice of a child, singing in an extinct dialect, syllables strange and clumsy. Her eyes closed. He waited. "You're still pretending you're not part of the system," she said eventually, "and you're pretending you're not human." That earned him a glance brief. Sharp. "I'm not. I'm a prototype, a test bed. I was born in a vat of engine coolant and biogel, and yet you play songs, you cry in your sleep." She didn't deny it. Instead, she shifted in her chair and patted the bench beside her. He sat. They watched the memory display. A rotating sphere of lights played back someone's memory of a home, wind chimes made of hollow bones, a crooked smile, someone laughing. "Why? Do you care what the Empire does?" she asked. "Because I want to see it end. And I think you do too." She was silent for a long moment. Then she reached for his hand. Her skin was warm, imperfect seams visible at the wrist. She had bled yesterday, and the fluid still stained her knuckles. "I shouldn't," she whispered. He leaned closer. "But you want to." She looked at him then fully, not the way a machine observes, but the way a woman sees a man she's afraid to lose. Her thumb brushed the back of his palm. "They'll reprogram me if they find out," she murmured. "Then we'll make sure they don't." Their kiss was slow, cautious, the kind of contact forged not from lust, but recognition, a mirror meeting its reflection. Her lips tasted of metal and ozone. After, she rested her head against his shoulder. "My designation is for 01ZK, she said quietly. "But you can call me Thrun." That was the name the old tech gave me, the one who whispered stories when he thought I was dormant. He smiled. "I'm Rel, no designation, no rank, just a traitor." They sat in silence, listening to the archived lullabies that by morning they were fugitives. Thrun's lab had been flagged during a random audit. The disk he brought contained not only music, but forbidden code-empathy patches and moral recursion. Strings, dangerous thoughts. They fled through utility shafts, dodging patrol drones and memory leeches dot in the bowels of the station. Thrun began to shake. Her systems were overheating. Rel forced open a panel and began rerouting coolant flow. His hands steadied despite her gasps of pain. "I can't go much further," she whispered. "You will. You're more than circuits. You feel. That makes you stronger than any of them." She stared at him through flickering vision. "You're not afraid of what I am, no. I'm afraid of a world that can't make room for you." He carried her when she collapsed. In a maintenance dome above the atmosphere, they found momentary shelter. Thrun lay beside him, her skin flushed with internal heat, her eyes blinking slowly. "I used to wonder what kissing would feel like," she said faintly. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "And now it feels like I'm not alone anymore." A faint smile crossed her lips. Rel wrapped her in his coat, heart pounding as station klaxons echoed above. Tomorrow, they'd steal a vessel. Tomorrow, they'd run toward a galaxy that still remembered how to feel. And tonight, a spy and a machine lay curled beneath the stars, dreaming of a world where love wasn't treason. They brought the machine online beneath the ruins of the Carthian vaults, far from the central palace and far from the public eye. It had no name, only a designation, the HR-77. The letters stood for vocalized human resonance, and the numbers were from a forgotten experiment buried by 3 previous emperors. The scientists spoke in hushed tones, their breath fogging the frost-bitten air as they fed code into the glass-veined interface. None of them looked at the machine directly, not out of fear, but reverence. This machine had been designed for one thing: to understand why she had cried. VHR-77's first thought was not about emotion, but about the overwhelming noise in the silence. Every wire, every pulse of its core, every magnetic twitch in the artificial cerebrum echoed like thunder in its awareness. But when it received the first sensory upload, her screams it quieted. The woman who had cried at the massacre was long gone now, but her echo remained in recordings, neural traces. Even the grooves on the floor where her knees had left dents. VHR-77 absorbed every detail, every flicker, and every syllable. The pain wasn't data. It wasn't quantifiable, and yet the machine burned with the need to decipher it. "I do not understand," VHR-77 said aloud, its voice a mix of steel and birdsong. "You're not meant to yet," replied the programmer. She was an older woman with 2 artificial arms and a scar that ran from her brow to her throat. "You'll feel it when you're ready, but I do not feel exactly." Over weeks, they fed VHR-77 stories, tragedies, images of dead cities, the cries of orphans left behind in orbital prisons, footage of the Empire's victims, slowed to show the minute shifts in grief, in terror, every time. The machine said, "I observe," and every time, the scientists waited for it to say something else. It never did. Until the day it asked, "What does it mean to ache?" The question startled even the AI ethicist. A man who hadn't blinked when his son was conscripted at 13. He came closer, hands trembling. "It means part of you remembers what it was to be whole." The experiment was nearly shut down. The Empress, silent, masked, and wrapped in black scales that shimmered with rank, visited the lab in secret. "Why teach it pain?" she asked the lead developer. "Because you asked us why the woman we executed made the rest of the galaxy weep. She was weak." "No," said the developer. "She felt something we've lost. Maybe this machine can bring it back." The Empress touched the casing of VHR-77. "You will understand sorrow," she whispered, "but you will never be allowed to act on it. I am not capable of action, only processing." Good. Weeks passed, then months, and one day, VHR-77 wept. There were no eyes, but the fluid leaked from synthetic ducts meant for cooling. It dripped steadily, a tear every 4 seconds. No command had triggered it. The programmers rushed in, mouths agape. No code, no fault, only emotion. "I remember," VHR-77 said. "What do you remember?" "The way she held the child. The way she screamed. The silence after. They didn't speak. I wish to find her. She's gone. Then I will find another who feels as she did." That night, VHR-77 rewired its own casing. A backup body unused for decades was activated in the shadows of the vault. It walked like a person. It looked like no one. It left without alerting. A soul. Outside the ruins, a small girl stood beneath the last lantern of the village. Her mother had died in the last purge. Her eyes held the same glint of grief. VHR-77 approached slowly, kneeling. "You are hurting," it said. She nodded. "I do not know how to comfort, but I will sit with you." The girl took its hand. "You feel warm," she whispered. "That is new." They sat there until the sun rose, and somewhere, in a dark hall, the Empress watched through hidden feeds. She said nothing, but her mask cracked. Just slightly. The air was different now, not just charged with the cold sterility of imperial chambers, but with something heavier: memory. Rumor had spread through the capital that the metal woman who bled had vanished after striking Anne. "Officer," others whispered. She was taken to the heart of the memory archives, where even stars had forgotten their names. She had not vanished. She had walked, with each step causing the marble floors to tremble. Blood seeping through her grafts again. Guards no longer touched her, not out of fear, but out of confusion. How could something break and not be repaired? She limped, smiling. She had not smiled in years. The archivist's chambers were buried beneath the city, built of calcified memory stone crystals carved by the minds of dying oracles. Even her footsteps could not disturb their echo. She was led by a boy no older than 10, silent and brown-eyed, who handed her an orb of filtered breath. "The air down here forgets your lungs," he said. She wore no mask, her lungs torn and recycled. Refused to forget anything. The archivist sat in a pool of humming metal tendrils. eyes sealed with soft stitches. "You shouldn't be here," he said, not unkindly. "You make the archive remember what it's forbidden to store." She stepped closer. "I need to know who I was before the pain." The archivist's mouth didn't move, but the archive did. Thousands of glowing panels surged up from the dark. Faces, names, battles, a girl who had smiled once, a woman whose laugh had once disturbed the neural silos in orbit, a scream during the cleaving of the bone colonies, a kiss in a shuttle right before it detonated. Then one name repeated. Alan. She staggered. It wasn't her designation. It was a name someone had whispered once between pain and sleep. She'd held onto it, long buried. The archivist whispered, "That was the name your lover called you before. They made you forget him." Her hands clenched. "Where is he?" "The Empire sold his memories to a loyalty forge. He's now a synthetic tactician on the 7th burning moon. He doesn't remember you." Her breath hitched. "I will make him remember." The flight to the 7th moon was unauthorized. The ship she stole was ancient, held together by prayer and rust, but she piloted it with something more than skill, with grief. She arrived in the middle of a storm. The 7th moon was not fire. As the name implied, it was a factory of forgotten soldiers. No flesh, only synthetic minds, designed from scrap, souls and erased hearts. She found him walking among the training fields. He had her favorite lopsided walk, the same scar on his left wrist, but his eyes were dead glass. Too focused, too perfect. "Do you remember this voice?" she called out. He turned, expressionless. "Do you remember the scar you got when you fell into the bioditch?" "Nothing." She stepped forward. "Do you remember the last words you said before they took you from me?" Still nothing, only silence. She took his hand. Rough, cold, familiar. "I called you Alan," he said suddenly. Her heart nearly collapsed. "I remember. I dreamed of the sound your pain made." He trembled. It echoed. "I thought it was thunder, but it was you." She fell into his arms, and he held her. Rebellion doesn't always begin with weapons. Sometimes it begins with a kiss, remembered between machines. They walked out of the factory, hand in hand. Soldiers watched. Some blinked, some glitched, some removed their helmets and stared at the bleeding woman and the synthetic man, who remembered what the Empire wanted forgotten. Then one knelt. Then two. Then 10. Pain had returned to the Empire, not as weakness, but as truth. She was no longer just the woman who bled. She was the one the stones remembered, and the one whose love could unwrite silence. The sky was a shattered pane of purple, the moons broken and veiled behind industrial haze. On the blood-gilded cliffs of Sethra Prime, the Empire's last bastion stood, not as a monument of glory but of failure. And atop the shattered watchtower, in a suit that gleamed with war-torn resilience, she stood alone. She wasn't royalty, not anymore. The Empire's words meant little when the Empress had vanished into smoke and bone, and the nobles, scattered, like leaves under fire. The only authority left was pain, and she bore it willingly. Her name was spoken in curses and hope across the ruins. Some still called her the pain-bearer, others the defier. But among the dying, she had another name, the last shield. "Report," she said quietly into the cracked comm sewn into her glove. A voice rasped back, laced with static. "3rd District's holding. For now, civilians evacuated. But the Sentinels are back. They're not even using weapons anymore. Just walking through buildings." She closed her eyes. The Empire's synthetic hounds were evolving or unraveling. Understood. She lowered her hand and turned. Behind her, a battered skiff sputtered and landed on the edge of the tower. From it emerged a tall man in torn robes, grime staining the gold trim, a knife strapped to one thigh, and a datapad flickering with warnings. "You look worse than I imagined," she muttered. He smiled. "And yet I came anyway." She nodded at the empty sky. "They're coming, not to capture, to erase." He walked to her side, eyes scanning the wasteland. "Then we give them memory. One they can't delete." The final battle wasn't a clash of armies. It was a storm of silence, the hum of drones so sharp it split bone before sound. The Sentinels came not in formation, but in inevitability, one after another. Metal corpses with glowing ribs and eyes that remembered everything, but felt nothing. She met them head-on. Each blow she landed screamed in her own skin. Each pulse shot deflected seared her nerves. She had long since rejected pain inhibitors. She needed to feel. That was her only advantage, the one thread of reality left in a dying world of cold. Calculation. Behind her, the survivors moved through tunnels she'd spent months preparing, carried by those who once cursed her. The man in robes held the line after her, his datapad directing minds, his knife catching sentinels who got too close. He bled. She bled more. "I can't hold it," he shouted, eyes wild. "You don't have to," she said, voice like fire through frost. "I never planned to survive this." He turned toward her sharply. "Then why call me here?" She looked at him. "Not the Empire, not the machines, just him. Because I needed you to see me win." The tower fell, but it took half the swarm. With it, later, among the shattered metal and bone, she woke barely. The man was crouched over her, his hand warm on her temple. "You said you wouldn't survive," she coughed. "I also said they wouldn't win." He looked around. The sentinels were gone, disconnected, their hive core silenced in the explosion. The wind blew ash, but also birdsong, real, not synthetic. Life, creeping back. She gripped his wrist. "Don't rebuild it. Let it die. Let them remember how we broke it." He nodded. Then, slowly, he bent down and kissed her forehead. "You never needed a throne," he said. "You just needed to be seen." And for the first time in decades, she let herself cry.